Hey guys, and welcome back to our weekly Devo Just Ask Jason. This last Sunday, if you were watching our service, whether you were in person or live on Facebook, or you watched a little bit later on YouTube, you may have noticed that there is a specific term that came up in the text we were talking about. That term is test. The psalmist, the psalm we were examining, says, "Test me, God." And that idea of testing, well, it's a little bit strange. It's a little bit foreign to us. Because when we think of testing or tempting, then we're immediately, tempted, ironically, to ask the question, does God tempt us? And that's the question that we want to answer today. So the first thing that we want to establish is the meaning of a few different words. Testing, tempting, and plain old misfortune. The first two words, testing and tempting, are actually translated in our Bible from the same Greek term. The word is para, and a few other words that derive from it. And para can mean a couple different things depending on the context. In the sense of tempting, para can mean the desire that people have to do something that is wrong or to do something that is sinful. It's used in that context in James 1:13 through 14, where James teaches us that we are tempted not by God, but by ourselves, that our desire to sin comes from inside of us. But para can also mean testing, and testing is something a little bit different. Testing is something that you do, say in school, to figure out how much a student's learned, right? Or depending on your career field, you might perform tests on certain materials like a metal alloy to figure out, how much of each metal is in this compound? Or to figure out, is this compound dangerous? Is it helpful? Can we use it? Testing basically tells you what someone's made out of, or what something is made out of, or how much someone has learned. It's something that you do to figure out the quality of a person or a thing. And the Bible does teach, using the same word para, that God does test people. Testing can come directly from God. This is the case with Abraham in Genesis 22:1, where it says that God decided to test Abraham at the time. His name was Abram. Or God testing the entire nation of Israel in Deuteronomy 8:2. But testing can also come with God's permission from Satan. That's the case in the book of Job, where Satan actually asks God's permission to test Job, to try him, to see if he's a real follower, and God permits him. In that case, these things don't come from God, but God does allow it to happen. It's important for us to draw a distinction, though, between tempting, which comes from inside of us, that is our own fault. God doesn't tempt us, we tempt ourselves. And testing, which might come from God or might come from Satan or his demons with God's permission. And third category, misfortune. We just have to acknowledge that we live in a world where not everything has a greater purpose. Where some bad things happen to us, people get hurt, people die, we fall on financial hardship, difficult things happen in our government or in international affairs. Sometimes those bad things happen just because they happen, because we live in an imperfect and broken world. And that's something that I would term misfortune. It's not a biblical term, it's just something that I use to kind of wrap my mind around it. Not everything has a higher purpose. The Bible doesn't try to justify or spiritualize every bad day at work, every financial hardship, every broken bone or stubbed toe. Sometimes bad things just happen. But the Bible does teach that God can take anything, good, bad, or ugly, and use it for good if you follow him. That's from Romans 8:28. So if God doesn't tempt us, but he does sometimes test us, why? Why does God test us? Or why does he permit Satan in some situations to test us on his behalf? Well, the answer is kind of split up. There's a couple different reasons why. One answer is to prove that you're really faithful. Not to God. God knows everything. He sees your thoughts. He knows your emotions. So God knows if you're faithful. But sometimes God tests us so that we can see for ourselves that we really do believe, that we really do follow, that we can prove the quality of our faith to ourselves. Testing, in some ways, is a gift. Another reason why God might choose to test us is to increase our strength, to increase our faith, or to increase our independence. It's kind of like exercising. When you first start exercising, then, you're kind of weak. You can't run very far. Your lungs aren't really up to the job. Your muscles aren't really up to the job. But if you do a lot of little workouts, then you get stronger and stronger and stronger, right? Well, it's kind of the same way with these spiritual tests. When God tests you, or when he allows Satan to test you, when he allows certain things to happen to you, sometimes the purpose is kind of like a workout to just increase the quality of your faith, to increase your strength, to increase your trust in him and in his plan. Like I said earlier, not every bad thing that happens to you is God testing you or allowing Satan to test you. That's not always the case, but in some cases, God allows certain things to happen to us to make us stronger, to make us more faithful believers. And sometimes it's just so that we can prove our faith to ourselves, so that we can be confident that, we are followers of God. And in both cases, once that test is over, we're a little bit more ready to be given a really important mission from God. In a lot of ways, tests get us ready for the next chapter. Now, I can hear you guys out there saying or thinking or telling whoever's nearby, God won't give me more than I can handle, right? And the answer is, well, no. That idea doesn't actually show up anywhere in the Bible. The closest we have is 1 Corinthians 10:13, which teaches that God will allow you only to be tempted so far as you can handle. But the correct translation of Perah there is tempted, that he won't allow you to desire to sin so strongly that you can't say no. But that temptation comes from inside of you. It's not testing. In fact, the Bible makes no promises about God not testing us more than we can handle, at least on our own. You might go through times in your life that are so hard that you could never cope alone. And the purpose of some of those tests, some of those trials, some of those difficult times might be to get you to lean in and trust God and rely on his strength. Or in some cases, it might be to get you to rely on your family or your friends, those people that God gave us to support us and love us and help us to grow stronger. Sometimes tests make us more independent, but sometimes God gives us tests in our lives to make us more dependent on our friends, on our family, on our churches, or most importantly, on God himself. And at this point, we're kind of tempted to say, it's not fair that God tests me, but I want to address that real quick. First of all, remember, some bad things just happen. So if you're thinking of some event right now and you're thinking, well, God's testing me and this wasn't really fair, it might not be God testing you at all. It might just be that we live in an imperfect, broken world and bad things happen. But even if God is testing you, remember, he has a reason. We just don't know what it is. It's like when you're little and your parents had all these rules. And now most of our parents probably had rules they just made because we irritated them into making that rule. But most of the rules that our parents had were either to keep us safe or to make us a better person. They had a reason. Now, we didn't always understand why our parents needed us in bed by 10 o'clock, but they knew that we needed to get plenty of rest so that we could function at school the next day. We didn't always understand why our parents said that we had to be home by a certain hour at night, but they understood, even though we didn't, that it's dangerous for us to be out on the roads as a 16 or 17-year-old driver at a certain time of night. Our parents had rules. We didn't understand. And sometimes when God tests us, we look at him, we say, this isn't fair, I don't understand, but God has a purpose. He has a reason behind that testing, even if we don't get it just yet. Hopefully, one day we will. So let's sum it all up. What did we learn today? 3 simple things. First of all, God does not tempt us to sin, but he might test us to make our faith stronger so we can, flex our faith muscles. Gosh, that was corny. I'm sorry. Second of all, not everything bad that happens is a test. God can make good things come out of every bad situation, but some of those things, they just happen. God can use them, but it's not like he's the one who caused it. And third of all, if God is calling you to do something, do it. It might be a test that'll make you stronger. And if it isn't a test, he might just be calling you to do a really important mission for him, just like he did with the apostles. So if God is calling you to do something, do it. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. If this Devo helped you grow a little bit closer to God, helped you grow a little bit closer to Jesus, or even just gave you some things to think about, go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more Devos like this, as well as to get our Sunday sermons and a little bit of bonus content here and there. We really appreciate your time. Also follow us on Facebook while you're at it at Berean Connect Murfreesboro. We post a lot of stuff up there, some social media shareables, some Thursday 30-second theology snippets and some recommendations for things to do with your families over the weekends. So hopefully that can be helpful to you as well. We love you, we're rooting for you, and we thank you so much for spending some time with us today. God bless and have a wonderful week, guys.